Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us on the second episode of the VSI podcast on the 16 days of activism against gender based violence. I am your host, Catherine Pule, and today on the show, we talk to a survivor of rape. Hello, and welcome to this podcast. It's actually a pleasure to have you on this show.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Okay, so we'll just start with your experience. Tell us about your GBV experience.
My experience happened to me when I was very young, at a very young age, after my parents actually divorced. So I didn't know that it was gender-based violence because of the age I was at, and I wasn't actually informed about it. So I was raped after my parents got divorced, and we were living with my grandparents. And the first experience was with my uncle. And after that incident happened, I was told not to tell anybody because there was going to be harm caused to my parents or either to me. And the second experience was after my mom got married and we were living with my adoptive dad and his relatives as well. And so one of his nephews did the same to me, raped me, and I couldn't tell anybody about it. So it was a very bad experience for me. But the fact that I didn't know, I couldn't tell anybody.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I know the fact that you didn't know that whatever was happening to you was actually wrong. But do you remember how old you were?
So before I was able to open up to anybody, I asked my mom how old I was the time she and my dad divorced. And she said I was like about three to four, somewhere there.
Okay, so after you learned that whatever was happening to you when you were young was actually wrong, how did it impact your mental health and obviously your social life?
Well, honestly speaking, I got very depressed. I got depressed to a point that I wanted to take my own life twice, actually, because firstly, I thought nobody could understand what I was feeling, and the fact that I was told not to tell anybody was a suffocating experience because I was living in fear. I was very depressed. I had no one to talk to. I had no one to reach out to because I thought no one could relate to what I was feeling. So mostly I was battling with depression.
Okay, so how did you now get out of this trauma that you were experiencing?
Honestly speaking, I was so tired. So I reached a point one day when I went and followed my mom because she had gone to Bible school and I was approaching my senior secondary school. And I was admiring the peace that she began to experience. So she started teaching me about the Holy Spirit and God and everything. And so this time around, I followed her and asked her, like, why is God trying to punish me? Because I honestly thought, like, if there's this big God, why can't he take away all this pain I'm feeling? And so she said, if you're going through something like this, like you get to like it's not God's will for you to be in this space. You have to get to a point where you understand God for yourself, where you have a relationship. Just as you're talking to me as your mom, you should be able to talk to God like that. And so I started becoming intentional about asking God for help. And so I started praying for him to send help my way, of which he did. So after secondary school, I decided to go to Bible school. And at that point, I got to learn that my problem is not unique. Out there are a lot of people that have been raped, that have come from divorced parents, broken homes, and still were able to get out of it. And so after coming to the realization of that, I decided to find someone to confide in. And when I did, I think I started to receive the help I needed because the person I actually confided in was also a survivor of rape.
Yeah, so in Bimba they say that umulani taubola.
Yeah.
So after you realized that whatever was happening to you was wrong, did you ever take the step of reporting the matter to the victim support unit, the police?
No, I didn't.
Why?
Reason being is because, like, we take forgiveness differently. I don't even, like, sometimes, yes, when I do see these people, I'm like, do you ever remember what you did to me? And again, I always think, you know what, I forgive you. I just pray that you never do this to somebody else or you didn't do this to somebody else. So for me, my closure was, okay, I forgive you. I don't want to approach you, like, I'll love you from a distance. So I still haven't reached out to the police and everything or the victim support unit. but I use my story as a point of helping others be able to speak out. If their preference is reaching out to these authorities, that's fine. But my approach was a bit different.
Okay, but did you ever go for counseling?
Well, I received counseling from a family perspective. Like, my mom is a counselor. Yeah, so I have made her my best friend in that I'm comfortable to talk to her about things like this again. And if I'm feeling a certain way, somewhat, I find a way, or I tell her to find me somebody I can talk to. So I have.
Okay. What advice do you have for the parents, victims, and government, in terms of how they need to address GBV issues?
Firstly, charity begins at home. So my advice would be to the parents. It's never too early or too late to educate your children about gender-based violence, about sexual misconduct or anything. Like, once you start to teach your children these things when they are young, it's easy for them to know when something wrong is happening to them. And also in schools at early stages, to teach, not inappropriately, but in an appropriate way, teach children about how to defend themselves, how to speak out, how to incorporate, and also to the government to incorporate certain programs about these for the early stages of childhood, to avoid cases of where children fail to speak out for themselves, and just be able to understand when something alarming is about to happen to them.
Okay. Thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome. It was a pleasure.
Okay, that was a survivor of rape who was just sharing her story just to encourage GBV victims out there that there is still a hope. This has been the VSI podcast on the 16 days of activism against gender-based violence. This is Catherine Pule, and see you on the other side.